All right, welcome everyone to the February membership meeting of Mount Diablo Audubon Society. My name is Ariana Rickard and I am the Vice President and Program Chair for Mount Diablo Audubon. And we have a Salton Sea packed meeting this evening. First, we're going to hear from Frank Ruiz, the Salton Sea Program Director for Audubon California. And then our main program will be with Eddie Bartley. So just in case this webinar format is new to you, I just wanted to go over some of the Zoom features. If you want to change your view, you should see two buttons in the top right. One is going to be speaker view and one is going to be full screen. So there usually will only be one speaker, but you can toggle between those to find what you like. And depending on the version of Zoom that you have, you're going to have different options on the bottom of the screen. You're going to have one for Q&A. You might have one for raise hand or reactions, and then you're going to have one for chat. So what we're going to ask you to do tonight, since we won't be able to do sightings like we normally do when we're meeting in person, we're going to use the Q&A to ask participants to share your site, to ask you to share your sightings. So if you could put in the name of the bird, the location and the date, and we will read sightings after the board announcements. And thank you for providing your input at the January meeting about how we can make our meetings more interactive for our members. So we are going to try something different next month's meeting. At the March 4th meeting, we're going to, instead of doing this webinar, we're going to do a meeting where for our members and everyone joining us that evening can turn on their video and turn on their audio. And so instead of birding info, we're going to try to have like a little social time, and we'll have everybody break out into groups and we'll have some prompts. So that's what we're going to try for March in response to the request for more interactive meetings. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn it over to Frank, the Salton Sea Program Director for Audubon California, who's going to provide us an update on some recent breakthroughs for conserving the Salton Sea. So let me make sure. Okay, Frank, are you able to turn on your video?
All right, there you go.
Great.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah, good. Let me share my screen. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thank you for the invite. I appreciate the opportunity to present. This is an image of the Salton Sea. This is the south end. This body of water is the largest lake of California, as many of you may know. And the Salton Sea is perhaps the best example that we have of the water crisis in the West. It is not only affecting the environment, it's not only affecting the ecosystems, but it's also affecting, exacerbating the already existing conditions in the area. As the Salton Sea continues to recede at a much faster pace ever since 2017, due to both climate change, but mainly due to water transfers, the Salton Sea is rapidly receding, and this will continue exacerbating the public health crisis and the environmental crisis that we're experiencing so far. I'm just going to give you some quick facts of the Salton Sea. Some of you are experts on it, and some of you are probably not very acquainted. The Salton Sea is the last iteration of the ancient Quail Lake, and it is important to remember that, because the Salton Sea is not an accident. Even though this was created as part of an accident, the region has always have the Colorado water covering these lands. If you ask the Native American communities that live around the Salton Sea, they will tell you that the water has always been here. And it was created in 1905. It's a terminal lake. The salinity is about 60 parts per thousand. It depends where you measure it. I measure it every month. So different parts, vary just a little bit. It's about 35 miles long by 15 miles wide. It is the largest body of water in California. It receives about 700,000 to 800,000 acre feet of water annually. Just for you to have these numbers in mind, 1 acre foot of water is about 329,000 gallons, enough to feed, enough to sustain two families of four for a whole year. But it loses about 1.2 million acre feet of water annually. So that's another reason why it is rapidly shrinking. And this is one of the main stopovers for the migratory birds along the Pacific Flyway. And it is important to remember that in California, we lost over 95% of the wetlands due to either agricultural activities or urban developments. So this is why the Salton Sea is even more important. It's mainly sustained by agricultural runoffs on both ends of the sea, on the north end in the Coachella Valley and the south end at the Imperial County. And also the water that comes in from Mexico through the New River is mainly Colorado water as well. It is a huge environmental and public health crisis. Some of you may know that this region is plagued with inequities and inequalities. Most of the communities that live at the proximities to the lake are brown communities, and they have one of the highest asthma and COPD rates in the state of California. And so as the lake continues to recede, it will only make it worse. And so there are so many other things, but these are just some of the main facts to remember about the Salton Sea. And this image shows you how the Salton Sea is connected, not only to the rest of the saline lakes, but it's also connected to the water, the Western Water Network of the Colorado River. The Salton Sea is connected to the Colorado River both politically and hydrologically. So especially you're going to hear more about the Salton Sea coming up 2026 when the new interim guidelines will be discussed again for the drought contingency plan. So the drought is getting worse, and the Salton Sea is kind of like the battlefield for many of the water agencies and many of the other entities in the area. It depends who you ask. Some people would love to see the Salton Sea full of water again, and would love to advocate for water from the ocean. In my opinion, it's very, very unfeasible. But this is, how the Salton Sea is connected politically and hydrologically. No more than 60 years ago, the Salton Sea used to be the California Riviera and the main attraction in Southern California. You often, well, at least me, I often hear a lot of people talking about the Salton Sea during the heydays, the opportunities to come fishing, boating, golfing, dining. The Salton Sea was, the place to go, and it changed the landscape of the area. It forced many of the local governments to relocate the cattle ranches to create a more appealing landscape for all the visitors that used to come from Southern California, the Hollywood luminaries and so forth. At one point, the Salton Sea received more visitors than even the Yosemite National Park itself. So that's how coveted, this place was not so long ago during the 1950s and 60s. But now, the Salton Sea became an environmental, public health, and an economic crisis. As the salinity continues to spike, it is increasingly affecting the fish, that still survive in the lake, which is not very many. Tilapia is the only fish pretty much, and pupfish, in certain areas. But for the most part, fish is not able to reproduce anymore due to the high levels of salinity. And in certain areas, the Salton Sea is receding at a much faster pace. I monitor through the program that we have, the 14 spots that we have where we monitor the bird numbers. And we also do water testing and soil analysis for macroinvertebrates. And in the meantime, I also measure how fast, the water has receded on a monthly basis. And in last summer alone, there are areas where the water receded from the shoreline about 150 feet. So it is receding at a really fast pace. Of course, a public health crisis. As the lake recedes, the fear is that it will expose so much of the toxic dust that once it become airborne, it is going to exacerbate the already respiratory problems in the region. And I spoke, with so many of the physicians, and like one of them is Dr. Juan Carlson, who is the leading physician for UCR. And I remember, I interviewed her not long ago. And when I said, Dr. Carlson, what do you think of this crisis that is coming up? And she said, let me correct you, Frank. This crisis is not coming up. This crisis is already here. We're already training our physicians because the fine dust it can not only affect your lungs, it can go through your bloodstream and it can change even change your DNA. So we need to be mindful that this public health crisis will continue getting worse as the lake continues to recede. And of course, the economy is being affected big time. Housing is plummeting in the region. In COVID has made it even more difficult especially for the people that live the proximities. And Audubon has developed under my leadership an organic program that is trying to be more comprehensive. We have the bird surveys. We have the macroinvertebrate analysis. You see a picture on the left. We do the water testings on monthly basis, and we want to have a good understanding how salinity is affecting the different ecosystems and the different food networks. Why some of the birds are thriving while other ones are just falling in numbers. So, and we continue the policy elements as well. We've been successful in many different ways, and we have a lot of challenges too. But the program will not be complete if we didn't have the community engagement and the education opportunities, especially for minorities. We continue working with some of the high schools, providing different forums. Pre-COVID, we were able to bring them to the Salton Sea. During the COVID, we've been able to go to the classroom virtually and present different webinars and what it means, to do conservation, why minorities should join more conservation programs, why Audubon is eager to continue working at the sea. So this is something that we do, and we try to be comprehensive in our approach. I'm just going to give you some quick notable successes that we've had, and especially in the last, I will say, 2 years. The Newsom administration created 8 new positions to expedite the Salton Sea management plan. This is great news, although some of those positions have not been filled, especially the ones that are going to be working on the ground. But we are positive. We're very optimistic that these positions will expedite the implementation of the Salton Sea management plan. We also, last year, the Governor Newsom included in his budget 28 million to the New River and 10 million to the North Lake project. This was a great news because I mean, with the COVID situations, getting those monies, I think was very important. And the other one is that in more than 20 years, we had not had a Salton Sea congressional hearing. So it was great news to see something happening in Washington, and the House for Natural Resources Committee hosted a congressional hearing, and it was followed by the introduction of HRA 775, which is the Salton Sea Public Health and Environmental Protection Act from Congressman Ruiz and Congressman Vargas. We want Washington to be paying attention to the Salton Sea. After all, more than 40% of the land in and outside the Salton Sea belong to the federal government. So it is only fair, it's only right for those agencies to be more active. We have a really good collaboration here locally, but we will love for the marching orders to come from Washington, especially accompanied by more funding and more resources. Last month, we reported that we had really good news. The first project of the South Sea Management Plan, that is called the Species Conservation Habitat, broke ground, and this project is supposed to construct more than 4,000 acres of habitat, different kind of habitats, and this is part of the 10-year plan. So it is good news. I know it is taking a long time, but I think it is really good news, because hopefully, even in spite of COVID, we can continue and maintain the momentum. And Audubon got a grant from BOR, and we got a grant for over 700,000 to work on the preliminary designs for the Bombay Beach Wetlands project that is aimed to stabilize, to enhance, to protect more than 500 acres of wetlands. And this is a great project, because this is in partnership with the BOR, in partnership with IID, and we want to prove that this is the optimal use of water, that it can have multiple purposes. It can provide habitat, it can suppress dust, it can provide some other amenities for the community, hiking perhaps, bird watching, and we will love to engage some of the local students and the local communities to be part of it. So these are some of the most notable successes, but we have a lot of challenges, and one of them is slow progress of the implementation of the plan. I joined Audubon in 2017, and yeah, we've been fighting this uphill battle. Because why? Because the area is so political. Because water is so political. Because there are way too many cooks in the kitchen. There are many entities. The whole Salton Sea area is checkerboard. So two of the biggest hiccups, the state is encountering is access to water and access to land, because the state doesn't own neither one. So the progress has been slow. Funding is another one. Funding, especially for operation and management, or even though the monies and the fundings for the first phase of the Salton Sea Management Plan has been secure, we don't have, at least the state doesn't have a funding mechanism for O&M. A long-term management and governance. We don't know who is going to take care of these wetlands for years to come. We are talking about a conservancy. We're talking about some local governments. We've been talking, but there is no long-term management plan. We don't even have a long-term vision, and this is something that Audubon has been trying to push forward. We would love for the state to lay out a plan. This is, what we have in mind. This is the vision. And sometimes it's difficult to really do something when you don't have a concrete vision. Where are we going? And so that is, we're definitely lacking the vision. We need more participation from the federal agencies. As I mentioned before, there was a program from the USGS, that was cut off due to funding, and so the USGA was the only agency that was doing more of the biological monitoring. So that's when Audubon kind of kicked in some of the activities that we have. But I mean, we definitely need more participation from these entities. And of course, COVID-19, like many of you, COVID-19 has affected this region brutally. And not only the rates of infection, but economically. This region, I mean, in itself already deals with the second highest unemployment rate in the entire U.S. And with COVID, it has exacerbated these conditions. But here we are, and hopefully here we are to stay. We want to make a difference for the people and for the birds. Thank you very much for inviting me. If you have any questions, please, I'll be more than happy to take, if we have any time.
Thank you, Frank. Well, I think we have almost 100 participants on this call. I'm looking at the numbers and it's 98. So that shows you the interest the conservation community has on the Salton Sea. And, you know, so thankful for you for fighting for the protection of that area. If anyone has any question, you can either raise your hand and we can call on you, or you can put a question in the chat or in the Q&A. Okay, we've got one raised hand. Let's see. I think I got to scroll up here and unmute. Okay, Kate Hoffman, go ahead. I think you're unmuted. Oh, let's see.
Unmute.
Oh. I don't know. Oh, there you go. You want to ask your question?
Yeah, okay, you can hear me, good.
Yes,
yes. Frank, I was just wondering, when you're talking, we were down visiting the Salton Sea a few years ago when there was just this huge windstorm and just dust was just going everywhere. You know, it was really uncomfortable. And I think it's gotten worse since then. And I'm wondering, all those fine particles, how far do those travel? You talked about the doctor at UC Riverside. Are they really, like, how far are they dispersing? I know they can go pretty far. It's not just contained around the communities at the Salton Sea, right? It's going farther?
Absolutely. Some of the preliminary studies, you know, have shown that those particles can actually go as far as the greater Los Angeles area. Although those numbers are conservative. I have a friend who is a researcher for the Loma Linda University, and they've done some of the research at the Owens Lake, and they found, you know, that they have discovered particles from the Gobi Desert. So that tells you how far, you know, usually particles fly and travel. So I think, you know, we are being conservative when we say that the Salton Sea crisis, especially those toxic particles, can definitely cover the whole region. I think, you know, we can safely say that the greater Los Angeles area and the suburbs are going to be affected as well. I think, you know, this problem is going to be affecting all Californians, but, you know, definitely when it comes to the public health, we're talking about, you know, the whole Southern California.
Thanks, Rick. And then we have a question in the Q&A from Karen. How much water is used for agriculture? Are there controls on the amounts withdrawn?
Yeah, that's a great question. California is, out of all the 7 states, you know, California is the largest water user from the Colorado River. And traditionally, they were using more than 4.2 million acre feet of water. And most of the water, at least a third of the water, used to come to the Imperial Irrigation District. That used to distribute the water to all the farmers. Out of the agreement in 2003, they've been trying to cut down water through following programs and better irrigation systems. I think, you know, that even with all that, I mean, it is definitely saving water, but it's also affecting, because, you know, the less water they use, the less water that goes into the Salton Sea. And there was in 2003, the agreement stipulated that the ID needed to provide what they call it mitigation water. And that was almost about 700,000 acre feet of water that used to be going directly into the Salton Sea. That water is no longer, you know, available. So therefore, the only thing that is feeding into the Salton Sea is just, you know, the agricultural runoffs and about 90,000 acre feet of water that comes in from Mexico through the New River, which is very controversial as well, because, you know, it's one of the most polluted, tributaries, you know, that come into the Salton Sea.
Thanks, Frank. And then in the chat, we have, what birds have done well recently in this environment?
Yeah, it's really interesting because as the fish-eating birds are receding in numbers, we're also seeing a huge increment of some of the shorebirds and other birds, that are not so much, feeding from the shorelines. We are seeing a big increment of northern shovelers. At least during my surveys, I see sometimes I've seen up to 5,000 of them altogether. And but we're seeing the most is shorebirds. We see a lot of peeps. We see a lot of what else can we see? We see.
We can make Eddie answer that question.
Well, I think we're seeing we see a bunch of them. I think I'm trying to kind of give you some specific numbers, but we definitely see gulls, we see avocets, we see douchers, we see a lot of the birds that are common just to the shorelines, and those we're seeing in big numbers. Sandpipers, western pipers, we're seeing a bunch of them. I was trying to give you more numbers, but those are the birds that we are seeing the most.
Thanks. Okay, Alan, I think I just asked you to unmute so you can ask your question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Frank. Yeah, I'm curious about a couple of things. One is how much, at some point, the worsening salinity problem is really going to create more of a food collapse for the migratory birds. How close are we to that? And how big of an impact does the pollution have on, is it more localized to the inlet for the New River, or is the pollution also contributing to a potential food collapse if we stay on the path we are now?
Yeah, well, that is one of the concerns that the state is dealing with, and we have two issues. One is, of course, salinity, right? Salinity is affecting the ecosystems. Something that I'm seeing, this is a trend that I'm seeing at least in the last couple of years. We're seeing a huge increment of water involvement. Water involvement has, bugs, have increasing numbers, and for two reasons. One, fish numbers are declining, and usually fish used to prey on those larvae. So now water involvement are becoming more abundant, and a lot of them are actually coming out of the water and infesting. Maybe that's not the right word, but that's how the local communities will call it. It is infesting all the region. A lot of people dislike them big time because they're out by the millions, right? But that has prompted a lot of the birds to take to be more opportunistic. That's one of the things that I've seen because of the salinity is increasing, and you're right, it will continue to increase to a point where it will kill pretty much every organism in the water, and it will become like any other, like Mono Lake. It will become like any other saline lake. And another issue that the state is really having a hard time is controlling selenium, and the thing is that the river already becomes rich, in selenium. But what happens is, as the water evaporates, it builds bigger concentrations, right? So, and pretty much when all the water that goes into the sea comes from the from the Colorado River, but as it goes through the farms, it picks up, more salinity, because the farmers have to leach, their fields. And it picks up more nitrogen and other contents because of the agricultural activity. I think it exacerbates those conditions. So we are right now, I think if the state is more concerned about the salinity one and the selenium on the second hand, which I think both of them are huge problems. And in my opinion, salinity I think is probably easier to control. Selenium, not too sure how. I heard many different hypotheses and ideas how they're going to do it, but to this point I think I don't know if they have a concrete answer.
Thanks, Frank. Okay, last question for you. Any coordination with the Biden administration, i.e. the EPA, to clean up the New River from Mexico?
No, I've been to some of those meetings invited by Assemblyman Garcia and by other. I was also a member of the International Boundary and Water Commission, the Citizen Forum, and some of the discussions are being in that direction. However, Mexico is an independent. It is another country, and so the regulations do not apply to them. Uh, my biggest concern is not so much the contamination that come from the New River. My concern is that currently there is no agreement over to that water. And right now, I think we live in at least in the region, we live in a time and age where no water is really bad water, and even though the water is contaminated, like a friend of mine will say, we have the technology to clean it up. But my concern is, that there is no agreement. So we've heard in the past rumors, that Mexico wants to retain the water and treat it and use it, for their agricultural purposes. So that is a lot of water, that comes in from Mexico. And so that is one of my biggest concerns. And I think it is going to be one of the biggest hiccups for the state as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Frank. Hopefully you can come back future years and give us an update. Really appreciate having you, and good luck, and let us know. Yeah. Okay, great.
Thank you, Rana. Appreciate that.
So now I'm going to introduce our newsletter and website editor, Mark, who's gonna help us do our fun poll tonight. All right.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Dessen, the newsletter editor and website editor, and we thought it would be fun to do a poll on birds in pop culture. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And so this was Ariana and I kind of brainstorming this idea, and also a lot of help from my wife, Andrea Baer. And we came up with 8 questions for you that we'd like you to answer in a poll to see how up to date you are on pop culture birds. So I'm going to go ahead and start the first one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show the question here on the slide, and then Ariana is going to present a poll that you can actually vote on what you think is the correct answer, and then we'll show how everyone did and move on from there. So here we go to the next slide, and the first question. Mother Goose, this is all about Mother Goose. The Mother Goose's fairy tales were first published in England when? And we have 3 choices here, 100 years apart.
And we don't know how you're voting, so we will not share the results. We're all going to learn together tonight. All right. Still considering their options. Okay, it looks like people are done. So I'm going to share the results. Seem to be consensus on 1729.
And we'll go ahead and take a look at the answer here. And that is correct, 1729. It looks like most of us got it. And so the tales were actually first published in French in France in 1697, but 100 years later they were published in England in English. Okay, so let's move on to the next question here. Cartoon birds. So there's 3 cartoon birds there. Which cartoon bird character is the oldest?
Okay. People know their cartoon birds.
They sure do. Very nice. And the correct answer, in fact, is B. 75% of you got that right. So Donald Duck first appeared in 1934 and was the earliest bird character. All right, let's move to question number 3. Hedwig, Harry Potter's owl Hedwig, is a Eurasian eagle owl, a northern hawk owl, or a snowy owl?
Getting more participation on this one. People feel more confident about this, I think.
Very nice. Okay, and in fact, the answer is a snowy owl. Although, even though the character was female, the snowy owl that appeared in the movies was a male, which accounts for its bright plumage. So I don't think we've fooled many there, that's for sure. Okay, so the next question here, how many birds were trained and featured in the birds? 500, 2,400, or 3,200?
We should ask people to watch the movie and count how many birds they see.
Yeah. You'll have to find the deleted scenes though, because there's a few extras in there.
Okay, people think it's the lower number.
Interesting. So I was surprised too. I would have gotten this wrong, but the correct answer is 3,200. Which is amazing, obviously, and you know, there are also 5 species of birds that were used in the filming. All right, let's move to the next one. In October 31st, 2020, Saturday Night Live parody of the Birds. In that parody of the Birds menace Kate McKinnon and John Mulaney by throwing sandwiches, picking up turtles, or setting fire to a school. Setting fire to a school.
And if you look closely at the picture, you might be able to figure it out. If you need a clue. And if you haven't seen it, look it up.
It's very funny. It's very silly humor and laugh out loud in places. All right, I think we had to think about that one a little bit, but it looks like most people got the correct answer, picking up turtles. So, and as you can see in the picture, that's exactly what's going on there, and you don't want to see that too often. All right, let's move on to the next question. The Tower of London question. What kind of birds have been and continue to be housed for hundreds of years at the Tower of London? Crows, ravens, kestrels, or vultures? All right, so it looks like, again, you guys are good at this. In fact, it's B, ravens. So legend has it that 6 ravens must be kept at the Tower of London or the kingdom will fail. They actually had 8 until 3 weeks ago when one of them disappeared. You can actually look that story up, which really threw the Tower of London people in a tizzy. So they are looking to replace that that raven. So they have extra birds. Okay, moving on. 2020 Rockefeller Christmas tree. What kind of bird was stowed away in the 2020 Rockefeller Center Christmas tree? A pine siskin, northern saw-whet owl, or red-breasted nuthatch?
Oops, I think I got the answers confused. I don't have the same ones on your slide. I don't know how that happened. Sorry, Mark.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I thought I checked that too, but
People probably read this story because they seem to know the answer.
yeah, I would say that pretty much everybody's got this one. All right, and there it is, a northern saw-whet owl. The interesting thing about this, she was named Rocky, and she was released in the wild after receiving food and fluids at a wildlife center. And great pictures of Rocky. She's very cute. All right, and our final question is cars named after birds. So which one of the following is not a correct make model combination for cars named after birds? Buick Skylark, Ford Falcon, the Jeep Roadrunner, or AMC Eagle?
I think this is the toughest one, and I certainly did not get this one right.
All right, again, we didn't fool you. The answer is, in fact, Jeep Roadrunner. There is no Jeep Roadrunner, there is a Plymouth Roadrunner. So you did really well on that one too. So that is our poll. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for helping put that together. I know
Of
you all
course.
learned some very useful facts. You can stump some people. And we came up with so many questions, we might do the rest of them at a future meeting. So thank you, Mark. That was fun.
Thank you, Ariane. Bye-bye.
Okay, Jerry, our president. All right, I will let you take it away. Let's see, Mark, you might have to stop sharing so Jerry can share.
Can you see me? No? Hi
Yeah, we
there.
can see you.
Yeah, okay, very good. Just a couple of very quick announcements. Thanks everybody for attending. It looks like we have 102 participants, which is a very good number, and we appreciate you all logging in for the festivities. First off, our annual fundraising campaign that finished off at the start of the year garnered us around $13,000, and we very much appreciate the generosity of all our members. It was actually a few percent more than the 2019 result. And so we're humbled and honored by your contributions, and we thank you again for your generosity, and we'll be good stewards of your donations. And Steve Taylor, a member, asked me to share this. I think it's a very good idea. So I'm going to share that next Friday through Monday, Cornell Lab is putting on the Great Backyard Bird Count. And it's as you can see up with the affiliations up above, up here, it's along with the Audubon Society and the Birds of Canada. But the Great Backyard Bird Count starts on next Friday on the 12th through Monday, the 15th. It's 4 days of just recording the birds you see in your backyard or in hikes around the neighborhood. And given the times, it's a very good opportunity for everybody to participate in this kind of thing. And so if you Google Great Backyard Bird Count, or just go to birdcount.org, participate, it'll tell you exactly what to do to participate in the bird count, which is basically just using eBird or the Merlin mobile app or some device to log the birds that you see during this time, and the whole world is participating. And it's going to be interesting to see how many checklists get submitted and how many birds are seen. But I encourage all our members to look up Great Backyard Bird Count and do it on starting next Friday. Okay, so that's all I have. Ariana, back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Okay, so we've got some sightings that I'm going to read before we start our main program. From Cassie, we've got the red-breasted sapsucker on the golf course at Rossmore. On Saturday, January 30th, Nancy and Paul Shore found a red-naped sapsucker along Creek Road in Brentwood. And let's see, Jerry, I think you're, okay, cool. I don't know if you want us to see your email. In Heather Farm, Sora coming for the sparrow seeds, continuing wood duck and up to 5 cackling geese. A common goldeneye has been around in the concrete pond for at least 3 weeks. That's from Hugh. And Rosalie reminded Hugh, don't forget the solo male canvasback you showed me on Heather Farm Lake a week or so ago. And from Alan and Wendy, an American widgeon, hooded mergansers, and white-throated swift along Grayson Creek in Pleasant Hill. Well, thank you for sharing those sightings. And so now we have our main program of the evening. We're going to hear more about the Salton Sea from more birding perspective with Eddie Bartley. Eddie's he's been a conservation activist since his teens. He's a volunteer researcher and instructor with the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory, the California Academy of Sciences, and Golden Gate Audubon Society. And he's currently the president of the Yerba Buena chapter of the California Native Plant Society, as well as the Farallon Islands Foundation. And Eddie and his partner Noreen lead natural history, bird watching, and photography tours for Nature Trip out of their home base in San Francisco. And hopefully sometime soon, you will be able to join them on their nature trip. So Eddie, I'm going to turn it over to you, and welcome to Mount Diablo Audubon.
Righty, can you see my screen?
Yes.
And you can hear me okay?
Yeah, I could hear you great.
Well, hey, thanks so much for this opportunity to share information about like one of our favorite birding places. Noreen and I've been visiting down to the Coachella Valley and the Palm Deserts since the late 80s when some friends started moving down there, artist friends who went down there to join that vibrant art community that they have there, and also because it was much more affordable as they were teaching for their main gigs. I was just gonna talk a little bit about the natural history because I mean it's just such a fascinating place down there, and I know Frank, and thanks for that update, Frank. I know Audubon's been working on that for so many years, decades now. I was just looking back and saw a 2005 comment letter that I had sent to Fish and Wildlife, and I must say I thought by now there would have been more work done, but it's an expensive issue. Anyways, so this area is like really fascinating because it's this big trough area down at the bottom that is contiguous down into Mexico. The other, what I jokingly refer to as the Little Sink, is Death Valley, and many of you probably been to Badlands. And here's the Colorado River, if you can see that, see my mouse on there. And then here is what we refer to as the Big Sink. Some of the features on there that are the natural features that define this area is this transverse range that comes across the San Gabriels and San Bernardino Mountains, and then the peninsular range, which runs down from Southern California and down into the Baja Peninsula. A different look at it here. More locally, at the top of this Big Sink is the Coachella Valley, and this range right here is San Jacinto and Santa Rosa Mountains, and that's part of basically the northern part of the peninsular range, which runs down into Baja. I love this NASA picture here because it really shows how this bioregion is really contiguous primarily with Baja, but also the whole Sonoran Desert there. And you can see how at one time this was all underneath, this was all part of the the peninsula extended way up into where the Salton Sea and up to about where Indio is today. Also at the on the area on the right, you can see how it's dominant around the Salton Sea is the Colorado Desert, which is a subset of the Sonoran Desert. And just at the top of the Coachella Valley, it meets the Mojave. And so there's a very interesting intersection of two desert regions right there. Again, the Colorado River that runs down and almost makes it all the way, sometimes not all the time, to Mexico because of thirsty Arizona and California. A little different look, you can see the trough here. And here again is the Gulf of California. And you can see how all of this area is quite low. Even the surface level is 266 feet below sea level. So what's to keep it from flooding out, right? And basically what happened over about 3 million years, at least through all of the Pleistocene, the Colorado River would work to build up a delta in that part, in the southern region of the Imperial Valley. And eventually the delta reached the western shore of the Gulf of California, creating this massive dam that excluded the Salton Sea from the northern reaches of the Gulf. And today that is about 30 feet high, or 9 meters or 30 feet high. So basically this whole delta region down here is excluding this water from rushing in here. If it wasn't for that dam, the entire Salton Sink, along with the Imperial Valley and all the way up to about Indio, would be part of the Gulf. So Frank talked a little bit about what happened in 1905, but I wanted to kind of just share a little bit of additional information on that. So right down here in Mexicali, they were, the California Development Company cut an opening in the Colorado Riverbank in 1904, 4 miles south of the US-Mexico border, to send irrigation water via an earthen canal into the Imperial Valley. But in 1905, there were major floods on the Colorado, proved more than that makeshift dam could handle, and the river diverted course, basically dumping the Colorado back into where the Salton Sea was. So it cut two new, well, one, the new river is literally from that time because it cut a new river, and it also joined in with the Alamo River at that time. Just a kind of a note, one thing about that, our friends who moved down there, they used to say, well, when they were talking to people, talking to neighbors or folks they'd run into, they'd say, you know, and they'd ask where they lived, and they'd say, you're in high des or low des. And basically the high des down there was like Joshua Tree, primarily, Yucca Valley, 29 Palms, all this area up here. And the low des was the Coachella, or down into the Imperial. Most people start out by visiting the low des, Palm Springs primarily. And it's a very interesting area. It's a study in contrast for sure. Average rainfall, 2.6 inches. Golf courses, 124. I just checked. So so what is irrigating all of these golf courses is this very large aquifer that's underneath the Coachella Valley. And I remember when we first started visiting there in the 80s, they were saying, oh, there's so much water down there. We could use it for 100 years like this. when we were alarmed at seeing so much water in the desert. And they were saying, and that was back in the 80s. And well, today they're borrowing water from all the way up to the Yuba and other areas, and they've got water rights and they're replenishing that aquifer today. So they kind of overestimated, as often happens, how much resource they have there. Excuse me. And so anyway, these golf courses are still going strong, and it is pretty stunning to see these really fertilized irrigated golf courses. And you know, when we visit today, of course, a lot of these golf courses have these loops around them that you can walk around them, and we take advantage of that by because there's birds that are really attracted to it. So some of the birds that we often see that were probably a lot more plentiful than they would be otherwise are the fantastic Vermilion Flycatcher, female on the left there and the male on the right. And other more desert-like birds that are just common all the way through. Both the Mojave and the Sonoran deserts are verdant and black-tailed gnatcatchers. Here, both of these are in honey mesquite. And tuberosa, which is a native flower down there, or native plant, has been planted heavily because it's beautiful, and it also attracts Costa's hummingbirds as well as Anna's hummingbirds. That's a female Costa's on the left, and the fantastic purple gorget male on the right, and a Mojave yucca. A few more looks at those. When they, as the Annas and other hummingbirds, that iridescent gorget changes color constantly as it moves around. Little subadult male on the left, lower left. And one thing, all of this, there's a lot of elevation there, a lot of elevational changes in those mountains, and there's quite a lot of water that's being pushed to the surface by geologic forces. And all of these different gradients make a whole lot of different biodiversity. Super biodiverse region. Another major primary factor is the San Andreas Fault, which sort of terminates down there as far as we know. I mean, the maps show it kind of ending down by the sea, and there is a lot of shaking going on. It's fairly constant small quakes that occur within the sea, and all of that pressure that is being pushed by all of the pressure that the fault line is putting on the ground underneath pushes a lot of water to the surface. And it creates things like mud pots similar to Yellowstone, and some small geysers, and there's a lot of geothermal. I think it's like a couple of 100 feet down, the temperature of the water gets to like over 600 degrees. So there's quite a few hot springs around. And one of our favorite phenomena that occurs because of this pressure is these oases, these palm oases. This particular picture is of the McCallum Grove in Coachella. Basically, all of this, it's forcing this artisanal water to the surface here, and it creates these amazing wildlife magnets down there. Here's another one, also in the Coachella, 1,000 Palms. Another look at one, kind of you can see the interface with the ambrosia and many other desert plants. Those Palmas Preserve. This is one closer down by Mecca, just northeast of the Salton Sea. And it's one of the seldom visited ones, but it has this really neat paths that wind through it, and it has kind of a wilder look than some of them. A lot of these oases hold desert pupfish. And in fact, the Dos Palmas Preserve is set up just for that. BLM has a quite a large preserve down there called Dos Palmas. Here's some of our friends. A few years back, we went down there with the Golden Gate Audubon group. And the birding can be quite good in these little spots, as you can imagine. One of the easiest to visit, or the series of groves that are easiest to visit, is the Agua Caliente band of Cahuilla Indians. Have a series of Indian canyons. They're on the lower slope of Mount San Jacinto, and this photo right here is of Palm Canyon, which is the world's largest grove of Washingtonian filifera, which is the California fan palm. And they also have these other canyons that you can go and visit for a pretty nominal fee. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. These California fan palms are really wonderful. They have a lot of fruit often in the winter when we visit, and we only visit in the winter. I was looking back at all of our photos going back to the 90s, and they're all from October through April. No other months. As you can imagine, it gets hot as blazes down there. It's famous for it, actually. But these fruits are quite the magnet for birds and mammals. Here's a western bluebird hanging out on one. A couple warblers. Almost everybody loves fruit, really. So here's these two is orange crown and yellow rumps. Bluebirds in particular, their populations are doing really well. And one of the less common birds that is pretty shy and difficult to photograph, we've found, is a Scott's oriole. And they're not super numerous, but they're there. We get them almost every trip. A bird that I've not done very well at photographing because it's not only shy and hard to find, but endangered. So we don't really pursue them when we go down there, but we have over the years gotten a couple shots, and that's the Least Bell's vireo. And these canyons can be quite fun to explore. You've got the water running down them year round. And the sounds are just fantastic in the desert. When the wind's not blowing, it's so quiet. It's wonderful, except for the birds. It's very rainy down there. Marsh wren, not too common, although we picked them up in Coachella. They're very common down in the Salton Sea, which we'll talk about later. But all of these other wrens, including canyon wren, rock wren, cactus wren, they're numerous down there all throughout the Sonoran Desert. Almost everybody's favorite is the cactus wren. and they have kind of a chur 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 call of it. You usually hear, of course, like many birds, long before you see it. They have a very interesting nest that they usually put in cactus. Quite a good defense mechanism. Another look, this is also from the Indian Canyons area. So this is on the west side of the Coachella. And here's more like the east side of the Coachella, so quite a bit drier. And it seems like you wouldn't get much there, but you start looking and you find one of our favorite birds just because of the voice, especially, is the black-throated sparrow. Jaunty looking guy. And then brewer sparrows are uncommon, but we get them most every year. They're coming down from the places like Sierra Valley and such. Less common again is sagebrush and bell sparrow. We've actually never seen a sagebrush sparrow, but they get reported. Bell sparrow we get pretty regularly though, and mostly down by the sea, but also up into some of those drier areas like that. There's savanna sparrows and some of the areas closer to the sea primarily. The subspecies that is most common down there is the Beldini, which is basically like typical of like Point Concepcion down into Baja. But a bird that comes up from the Baja region is the large-billed savanna sparrow, so that's something to keep an eye out for. And of course, we got like our more common birds like spotted towhee, and occasionally we get rufous crowned sparrows. And a specialty of that area is, as you can see from the range map, is Hebert's towhee. But this region also crosses over from California towhee. I was curious whether they actually hybridize, but I couldn't find any records of it. But they're the most closely related of the melazone towhees. Another interesting transition zone and birds that are known to hybridize are the gambles and California quail. And you can kind of see how there's just a little section right here where the California quail comes into Gamble's quail. And that's just right about if the San Jacinto Santa Rosa Visitor Center. I know the reason we discovered this is when we were putting our records together, when we put in Gamble's quail for that area, and they're like, no, they don't think that there's any pure Gamble's or California quail in this one area that they've interbreed right there in this one small zone. So it's something to keep an eye out for. A little comparison between the two. I don't have any known photos of hybrids, but I've seen them. And they mostly look like Gamble's, but they have California type of elements to them. The Andreas Canyon is another gorgeous area that's an easy drive. and also in the Indian canyons. And you can, if you look up, sometimes you get the peninsular bighorn sheep up on the top, riding, walking up on the rocks. One time we were at a place and this young man comes running out really excited and said, the sheep are like coming right now. And sure as heck, we grabbed our camera out of our car and they were on us in no time. And were able to get a couple real close-up shots. And they walked through and just, it wasn't a minute. And of course there's coyote and bobcat. They're common, but not as common to see them, of course. There's this super cute squirrel, white-tailed antelope squirrel, that another really shy one, and of course California ground squirrels, not so shy. The two rabbits that are down there, the desert cottontail and the black-tailed jackrabbit. And a couple times we've seen these desert kangaroo rats, which are pretty cute. Long tails, really big back legs for jumping. Sometimes, for a diversion, if there's not a lot of snow on top, you can take a tram from Palm Springs up to Mount San Jacinto, up towards the top. It's closed when it's snowing, but we've really only done it one time because it's not inexpensive, but it is a pretty fantastic ride. The scenery was quite breathtaking on the way up. But once you get up there, it's like you're in the Sierra. And you get breathtaking views. There's a Salton Sea. It wasn't a particularly clear day when we were there, but it was really fun to just suddenly go from the desert floor and you're up seeing Sierra-like birds, or not Sierra-like, they are the same species that are in the Sierra. White-headed woodpeckers and the nuthatches, Steller's jay. Before we head to the sea, I thought I'd show you 3 other places that we almost always go. We usually go for a week to 2 weeks down there, and either sometimes stay with friends or we rent condos often because it's so we can have a kitchen and all. It's fairly inexpensive compared to a lot of California, but there's 3 areas that sort of like bridge between the Mojave and the Sonoran or the Colorado Desert. So this is in the north part of the Coachella Valley, and they're all pretty close together. The first one, Whitewater Preserve, it's kind of relatively new. I forget what year it opened, maybe 10 years ago, 15. There's been a western screech owl that's been hanging out in a sycamore tree several times when we've gone there. Sorry about that. And it's a really good place to see more sheep too, because they're up on this ridge that's on the right there. You can look up, and often we've seen bighorn sheep up there. And there's a peregrine falcons that have a nest in the cliffside there too. So we catch up with them. Every time we've been, we've seen peregrine falcons. Another place that's really close, and this is a more famous, more well-known birding location, is Big Morongo Preserve. It's one of the 10 largest cottonwood wetlands. It's not really the largest in the US, that's a typo. It's one of the largest cottonwood wetlands in California, though. And it's just really a gorgeous place, and well-appointed boardwalks. The cottonwoods are just quite stunning there. And we make a point to go there at least once, often twice every time we visit, because the birding is quite good there. For one thing, they do have a feeder, so that'll draw in some of the uncommon birds like mountain chickadee. In winters, they probably descend from Mount San Jacinto and some of the higher parts like Joshua Tree. And they've got a water feature. There's some cedar waxwings, and oak titmouse, red-breasted nuthatch. Those types of birds are not easy to find just every place, but they're there. Also, it's a really great place to get both nuttals and ladderback woodpecker, which, you know, they're not cogeners, but they are very similar, and it definitely takes a look to see which is which unless they call. And whereas we are more likely to get red-breasted sapsuckers in Northern California in winter, red-naped sapsuckers is a more likely sapsucker to show up there, and they're pretty regular. Also, some uncommon flycatchers, or they would be for us in the Bay Area, as a gray flycatcher. Pretty regular, more likely to see that at whitewater than big morongo, and the Cassin's kingbird you're more likely to see at big morongo than whitewater, but both have been at both locations. Gray flycatcher is fairly common, but you gotta look around. They're scattered. One of our favorites, absolutely, is the shining rail bird, Phainopepla, and they really have a fascinating life history in that they have two different breeding periods. February through April, they breed in the Sonoran Desert in Arizona and California, and May through July, there's a second breeding in oaks and sycamore canyons, also Arizona and California. It's the only silky flycatcher in North America. And anyway, they have a beautiful sound, and they're quite gorgeous. And not only that, you can sometimes see them. Like, this is a May visit, I think, here, and that we've found them nesting. But the males are like primary incubators too, so that's a male on a nest there on the right. One of their primary food sources is desert mistletoe, and you can, if you see this desert mistletoe, which is fairly common, almost certainly there's going to be a Phainopepla around. Another interesting bird down there, and it took us a little while to figure this out, the California scrub jays they have down there, they're a little bit smaller. They're like more blue, more moving towards purple on the blue. And they're a little bit more brownish on the back. Interesting, but you notice it when you get there, especially if they're in low light. They just tend to kind of glow. Both those places too, really fun. There's some very nice butterflies that happen there. Unusual butterflies like the California patch and Becker's white. If you're into butterflying, it's a good spot even in the wintertime. And then we almost always go up to Joshua Tree. We have friends that live up in JT, they call it. And so we'll visit up there and always go into the park. It can be pretty chilly up there because I mean they're up. I think it's about 4,500 feet and up in the top part of the park. The famous Skull Rock on the right and a Joshua Tree Blossom on the left. It's a place you're likely to see roadrunners often on the road, as this one is. In this photo, you can kind of see how the tail is iridescent. It's like green and blue iridescent. Good place to see loggerhead shrikes as well. Fairly common bird here, but nice to see them. They're common throughout the desert part. It's also very thrasher-like down there. Especially northern mockingbirds is a bird that in our experience whose population has really expanded a lot since we've been going down there. So, I mean, they just seem like they're everywhere now. Sage thrasher can be rare on some of your eBird hotspots, but I think they're moving in to some of these areas. California thrasher is common. And all of the birds on the bottom are uncommon to rare, but possible. So they're all listed in both Riverside and Imperial counties. And I've never seen a Bend Iris thrasher in there, but I think it's because they come mostly in the summertime over from the Yuma, Arizona area along the Colorado River. Curved bill, same thing. They're uncommon, but not rare. But the scenery up there, I mean, it's just, even though the birding in the wintertime is not always that great, it can be kind of scarce on birds, but the scenery is just stunning up there, so it's always worth a trip. This is their famous teddy bear cholla garden. A sunset look. It's a reason it's a national park. And I'm not going to get into a lot of plants. We don't have time for that. But we love it. The plants, and interestingly enough, probably one of the best field guides for plants over there is the field guide to the plants of Baja California. And usually after this, we'll drop down to the sea. We're there. We probably go to the sea 2 or 3 days out of the week, just because it's just a wonderful place. And even despite all of its woes, the birding is fantastic down there. And you can really get into a lot of multitudes. And when there's multitudes, there's often rarities, and there's a lot of rarities that show up down there. There's also a lot of natural phenomena that happens there in wintertime. Probably summer too, but we're not there then. And but you get, when the storms do come in, and they'll hit San Jacinto, and sometimes and Santa Rosa Mountain, and then they'll just kind of come over, and they make some amazing effects. Another phenomena that's not so great, and one that Frank was talking about, are these alkali dust storms that can happen. And you can sometimes see them for, very many miles away. This is from the Salton Sea State Recreation Area, and you can see that. And it, on that occasion, it gave us time to kind of get away from it and take shelter, because they're not something you want to be breathing in. Another thing to keep in mind when you're there, if you are there and it rains, which they, like us, get most of their rain in the wintertime, then you want to really be careful about driving out or even walking into that. A lot of that muck, when it gets wet, it'll just cake right to your tires and to your boots. So you can kind of see where people have been walking around in it here. It's often, it's kind of fun while you're there. There's on the right, you can see this imprint of today's Salton Sea. But to think about Lake Kahu, or also known as Blake's Lake, named after this guy, William Blake, who first named it Lake Kahu while surveying for the Southern Railway in 1858. And the Kahu Indians were present there at least 2,000 years, probably more like 5 to 10,000 years, but definitely 2,000 years. And there was quite a few Cahuilla bands in that area, the Agua Caliente, Torres Martinez, Morongo, and others that I know less of. But there's a very vibrant culture in those on the Indian lands there, and we've enjoyed. They have powwows that they annual during non-COVID times that the Agua Caliente band puts together, and they invite public to it, and they're really quite amazing. So as far as birding goes, you know, since eBird has come online, we started using it not until like 2015 really, but it's just a wonderful way to find out like if any rarities are showing up. And you can, you know, these maps that they have, most of you are very familiar with, I'm sure. And, you know, basically the redder, the better. I mean, these places have, you can kind of see these areas where these orange spots and these that red spot and all along in here, those are really some of the better birding hot spots and the ones that we've already knew to focus on. There's also this wonderful resource that's put together by Audubon California called the Salton Sea Birding Trails. And it gives really good information about food and lodging. I don't know how well it's kept up, but it's quite good. And so I was going to talk first about this little area. This is kind of the stretch that we often birds put a lot of time into. It's starting out at the North Shore Beach and Yacht Club and the Salton Sea State Recreation Area, which stretches off and on for about 15 or 20 miles right there. The first place we usually go is the North Shore Beach and Yacht Club. Albert Frey designed this back in 1959 when the Salton Sea was still in its heyday before the major decline happened. And it was, you know, quite the hot spot. The Rat Pack evidently played there, and, you know, it was a lot of entertainment, a lot of Hollywood types went there to party. And then it started going into decline along with the sea. And in 1981, it was destroyed by a flood. And then it just kind of kept declining for the next 30 years. But in 2005, just kind of an amusing thing I just found out, was used as a site for a film. And it's kind of, the film had a biker vibe, and sort of that area, there is some biker vibe in that area. People still riding around on their hogs, you know, and bikers will make a weekend of it there. It was restored by Riverside County, a bond, and the home of the Salton Sea History Museum for a while. they moved out, and today it's the Riverside County Community Center, which is livened up by you know, people that are using it for daycare and all sorts of things, parties and weddings and such. So up until about the last 3 years, we'd go out and there would be a lot of remnants of the big fish kills the place is famous for. In recent years, the last couple years, that's all been kind of crunched down. And now it's like this, it's mostly just barnacles. Interesting study on, you know, how the increasing salinity has basically, you know, been a bust for the fish, and as well as the piscivorous birds. You can see and hear American white pelican and double-crested cormorant numbers fell off, as well as other birds, you know, eared grebes in particular. When we started going down there in the 90s, there were just hundreds of thousands of eared grebes, and now almost none. Little graph on the rising salinity, and some of the, here's the salinity has just been increasing. This is sort of old news, but it only goes through 2004, and you can kind of see how some of the fish stocks, tilapia did really well for a while, but then crashed and haven't been doing near as well. And now there's very few fish left. This photo here, 2011, back when there was still a plethora of eared grebes. And this is also from about that same period of time when I think there were thousands of American white pelicans at that time, and we're still seeing them, but now they're in the low hundreds, it appears, and very few brown pelicans make the trip now. Just a random pelican shot here. However, there are some duck species that seem to be, you know, it's still a boom and bust, but like you might go down 1 year and there's hundreds of redheads, and this last year, 2020, we went down and there was just seemed like blue-winged teal everywhere. So, you know, there's still tons of birds. It's just that the makeup of the species is changing quite a lot. Again, this is a recreation area. Gulls, there's so many gulls. You just, you know, primarily the big ones are herring gulls. We do get Thayers or Iceland gulls down there too, but herring, ring-billed, and California gulls are the dominant species. And then some years, and especially this last year, there were a lot of Bonaparte's gulls. And this is just a really wonderful bird. I'm sure everybody shares enthusiasm about this. They're just a very elegant and super agile small gull, more almost tern-like. And there's, you know, this last year there were thousands of them. But sometimes, you know, with all of these birds, as I was saying, there's always can be a rarity. And in this case, we had there was a black-headed gull that had been found, and we were able to re-find it down there at the Salton Sea State Recreation Area and get a couple quick photographs. It looks very similar, and it hangs out with Bonaparte's gulls, but it's bigger, red bill. There's another look at it. Also, laughing gulls seem like they're becoming more common, but they're still considered rare. Another rarity that you might be surprised at is Western gull. but it does seem like they are increasingly visiting the sea. The first time we saw them, I was a little bit perplexed at how dark they looked. And it ends up it's this subspecies, a separate subspecies, Waimani, that is Southern California and into Baja, that western gull. Much sought after gull down there is a yellow-footed gull. And you can see by their range, it's a very limited range on this bird. And they just, not known to breed down there, but they come up to the sea. In our experience, it's better later in the winter, like March time frame. You'll have more luck finding them. Handsome gull though. And there's often lots of double-crested cormorants, especially in the south part. But you need to check them because every once in a while you might get a neotropic. Get your fourth cormorant species in California that way. Moving on south, we usually just kind of bump on down and get down into the Imperial Irrigation District. There's a series of canals and wetlands that are part of the irrigation district, of the water that is used for farming down there. And this particular area is one of our favorites. You can, a lot of them is the salt has really built up in these places. As Frank said, it's an endorheic system, meaning that water comes in and the only way it leaves is by evaporation. And so the salt just can build up and build up in these places. And this, it sometimes doesn't look very promising. You're looking out and it's like, it looks sort of dead. But, of course, there's some birds that's perfect for them. In the background, you can see one of the many geothermal plants down there, particularly, clean type of energy, actually. In these briny habitat specialists, snowy plover, all of the peeps. As Frank was saying, it does seem like the calidra sandpipers are certainly building up. Black-belly plover is fairly common, and pipits also, you'll see all through there, that kind of region. In a little bit deeper water, you're going to get another bird that's pretty well sought after is stilt sandpipers. And then, of course, you get lots of greater yellow legs and the occasional lesser yellow legs. And we've had red knot and dowitchers seem like they're on the increase of wintering there. And then, of course, you get lots and lots of avocets and black-necked stilts. Another area that we like to go down to is the Imperial Valley. And this is just sort of the north end of a giant valley, but it gives you a flavor of it if you drive these kind of farm roads, and there's lots of irrigation ditches that all cut through all those blue lines that you see there. And it looks like this. Here's a field you might, drive down one lane. A lot of them are gravel. Most of them are gravel. And you'll just see hundreds of long-billed curlews in a field. Turn around and there's, a couple thousand red-winged blackbirds. A lot of these egrets will follow along, especially the cattle egrets, follow along the combines and get insects that get stirred up. And then along the ditches, they'll gather in big numbers. White ibis, white-faced ibis. And then 3 different species of egrets, mostly cattle. So another specialty is burrowing owl for the area. And there's a very high population of burrowing owls. A bird that's definitely dropping in population, mountain plover. In fact, we haven't got very many good photos from that area, but so I snuck in a couple from Montana in their breeding plumage. Pipits, horned larks, and mountain bluebirds are really often in this area too. Grackles every place. A couple of specialty hawks, red tails, ferruginous. Ferruginous are uncommon, but we get to see them just about every year. And then one of the most populous areas for birds is the Sonny Bono Salton Sea National Wildlife Refuge. This is a really good place for seeing perched falcons, especially. Very high concentrations of peregrines and kestrels, especially the prairie and the merlin less so, but we get to see them. Also, this shot on the left of the owl is from the visitor center, peeking out of one of the palm trees. And of course, I've got great horns. You can find long ears in the Tamarisk sometimes, if you're lucky. And same thing, short-eared owls, mostly open fields and marshes. Some uncommon doves, lots of mourning doves, but ground doves, white-winged, and Inca dove. So some of the southern specialties. This is off of the Rock Hill Trail. It's kind of one of the few trails you can walk out from Sonny Bono, and there can be lots and lots of birds out there. Not really going to go into ducks a whole lot, but there's typical of the California wildlife refuges. There's lots of white geese. Occasionally you get a blue goose or 2. We like to end our day usually at what's called Unit 1. And so here's the main visitor center and the Rock Hill Trail, and we'll wind our way through these roads. Some of them are not in very good shape. You need a high clearance vehicle, and there's lots of farm equipment that use them, so you have to be pretty careful. But you can at places get out and drive the levee, and usually get rewarded with unusual sightings. This is not my photo on the left, but in 2010 and 2013, a bean goose showed up down there, super rare here in North America. We got to see it, but we certainly didn't get it was like, a couple hundred yards away through a scope kind of thing. But lucky Garrett McDonald got a photo. I think they were attributing this one to tundra bean goose, but there was a lot of debate about it. And then we've had rough out there at Unit 1, 2019 and 2020. It's a good place to get both bittern species. And right at the platform, the overlook at Unit 1 is a really excellent place to get rails. You'll almost certainly hear Ridgway's rail, which used to be considered the Yuma subspecies of the clapper. And then we occasionally get gallinule, Thora, and Virginia are common too. And then it's just a really great place to be at sunset. It's one of our favorite places because you get big flyouts. And there's often a lot of sandhill cranes in the air flying out at night. and just the overlook. There's just a lot of birds in the area, and some nice lighting too that you can get right at sunset. And that's it. Are we still there?
Yes, thank you, Eddie. Let's see. Does anyone have any questions? We can either unmute you or you can put it in the chat or in the Q&A. Let me clear the Q&A.
Or I'll stop the share too.
Okay, let's see. Let me get rid of these other ones so we are ready for any questions people have. Okay, just got a nice comment. Thank you, very interesting. Wow, what a great presentation. An area we don't hear that much about. Can you see the chat?
Oh, yeah, I'm
Okay,
looking
great.
at it now.
Okay, great. Do you have any plugs, Eddie?
Any plugs?
Yeah.
Sure. You mean as far as conservation work?
I don't know, whatever you've got going on. I know you've got the birdathon. Oh, here we got a question. Do you see the Q&A?
Sure. Let me look at that. Yes. In fact, I just kind of realized that I had put in too many slides in there, so we couldn't accommodate Anzo Borrego as well. But Anzo Borrego, especially like in February and March, as well as Joshua Tree and wet years, the flowers, the wildflowers can just be amazing. And the birding is quite good up there too. Palm Canyon is just one of our favorite hikes. Typically, that's another place we make it there almost every trip. Love it. That area, there's an area that is called Tamarisk Grove Camping Ground, and we've been able to find long-eared owl there the last couple trips, so that's been nice.
Great, sorry.
We didn't actually get to go there this year for the first time in a very long time because of COVID, of course, so we were kind of sad about it, but I really, you know, it was sort of some salve for the soul to be able to put this presentation together because we were supposed to be there for 2 weeks and it was like, oh man. So we miss our friends and we miss the Salton Sea, and we're really grateful for the work that that California Audubon and all those groups down there are doing to hopefully they'll work something out. It sounded to me like there was some pretty dramatic plans, and including like abandoning big parts of the sea and just trying to minimize the dust. You know, and I know that it's a similar situation. A lot of you might remember Lake Mono, when Owens Valley was getting pulled from all the water there, and then they've had to restore it. So if I was gonna go for just one night and day, I would probably either focus on either the northeast area, if you're talking about the Salton Sea itself, and just maybe stay in Indio, and then drive down and just focus on the northeast section. We've done whole days where we've looped the sea basically, but it can make for a long day. Another really good choice is to stay in Brawley and then focus on the south part. But I definitely recommend, if you can do it, to have more than one day because it's quite a ways to go.
All right,
Hey,
well.
Herb and Randy Long. I see them. All right. We miss you too. hopefully we'll all be able to get together very soon.
Yeah, and so, you know, probably you don't have any trips planned, but we can tell people to check out your website for when that is safe to do.
Yeah, we keep planning and then they have to get canceled. So we're a little hesitant to suggest anything, but we're really hopeful by next January we'll be able to, you know, go down to the sea again. And it's pretty special down there, that's for sure. I recommend people go check it out and support the area as soon as they can.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Eddie.
Thank you.
So that's it for my 6-year-old is healing. Anyway, so that's it for our meeting. Oh man, someone's okay. I better go before someone busts down the door. We will see you.
Yeah, don't let that happen.
I don't know why he's pounding on the door. You could just open it. But anyway, so we'll see you next month for our March meeting. It's going to be Wildflowers of Mount Diablo with Stephen Smith. And like I said, we're going to make that one a little bit different. So it's not going to be a webinar. It's going to be a meeting where everyone can turn on their video, and we're going to do breakout groups. And if you're not familiar with the breakout groups, that means we'll divide you up into smaller groups. And so then you're going to be in a room with like 3 or 4 people, and we'll have some fun prompts, and you can just talk to your fellow members, which I know we've all been missing. So anyway, so that's it for us, and have a good rest of your evening, and we'll see you next month. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.